You know how his history can feel, well, huge, and sometimes you just want to get right to the core of those key moments, understand why they really mattered. That's exactly what we're aiming for today. We're doing a deep dive into a really, really crucial time in Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj's life.
Right after his father's release.
Exactly. His big push to really cement his power in the Konkan and those vital upland areas. It wasn't easy. Lots of strategy, major hurdles.
And that ambition, to truly control the Western Ghats.
Yes. And what's interesting right from the start is just how strategic he was being.
Oh, absolutely. This wasn't just grabbing land. He was thinking moves ahead, understanding the terrain, the power players.
Like positioning pieces on a chessboard?
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
Controlling the Ghats, that wasn't just about prestige. It was foundational security, economy, everything for what came next.
And Javli, which we'll get into, that wasn't just another fort.
No. Securing Javli was like connecting the dots, creating a solid, defendable base, not just scattered holdings.
Okay. And for this deep dive, we've got some really fascinating sources. Historical biographies, chronicles.
And they don't always tell the exact same story, which is part of the interest.
Definitely. We'll explore some of those differences. So, setting the stage. Bijapur Sultanate. They're in a tricky spot at this time, right?
Yeah, very tricky. Hitting Shivaji directly could, stir things up with the Mughals, so they went for a more indirect route initially.
Clandestine, almost.
You could say that. Which led to that attempted surprise attack. Shivaji Maharaj led it, with support from Chandrarao Moore, the Deshmukh of Javli.
And for listeners, a Deshmukh is like a hereditary local chief, yeah.
Yeah.
Lots of power in their area.
Precisely. But the attack failed, which really tells you something about Shivaji's intelligence network even then.
His scouts were on the ball.
They were. Shivaji Maharaj had to pull back. Not the result Bijapur wanted, obviously.
Okay, so that sets things up. And it brings us right to the heart of this period. The Moore family of Javli. Shivaji saw their support for his enemies as, well, more than just annoying. It was a strategic problem he had to deal with.
A major impediment. This wasn't some minor feud. Chandrarao Moore was influential.
How influential are we talking?
Well, he basically ruled the Krishna and Warna River watershed, a critical area. He had over 1,000 Mavalis working for him.
And Mavalis weren't just standard soldiers, right? They knew the terrain, fiercely loyal locally.
Exactly. A force Shivaji needed either on his side or, well, neutralized. Moore was a big feudal lord under Bijapur, rich from tribute surplus.
And he had forts.
Key hill forts, like Hashimgrad, very important.
And Shivaji had actually tried the diplomatic road first. This wasn't his immediate go-to.
No, he was pragmatic. He'd approached Moore earlier, offered him options.
What kind of options?
Basically, either pay the tribute you send to Bijapur to me instead, Shivaji said, or you can even keep the money, but you have to give me military backing.
How much backing?
5,000 men, which was a substantial number. But Moore said no, repeatedly. He was sticking with Bijapur.
So Javli wasn't just some random target. The sources really stress its strategic importance for Shivaji's bigger picture.
Absolute critical. It controlled mountain passes, valleys essential for locking down the Western Ghats.
Which wasn't just about regional power, was it? It was about challenging the bigger powers, the Mohammedan power, as some texts say.
It laid the groundwork. Think of Javli as the keystone. Without it, his other forts were like, well, isolated islands, vulnerable.
Right, so securing Javli connected everything, made it defensible, a real power base.
Exactly. Without it, his position in the highlands was always going to be shaky. It was a geographical choke point. Whoever held it held a lot of cards.
But taking on the Moors directly,
yeah,
that was risky.
Hugely risky. They had history, prestige, those thousands of loyal Mavalis.
Incapable people under them, too.
Definitely. Surya Rao, Chandrarao's brother, and Hanuman Rao, his secretary. Both known for your military skill. Even Shivaji knew a straight fight would be tough.
Which kind of speaks to his methods, doesn't it? He didn't always just charge in, he was calculated.
Often preferred a more nuanced approach, especially against someone established like Moore.
And this brings us to, well, a really fascinating puzzle. How Javli actually fell. The accounts differ quite a bit.
They really do. It's like historical detective work.
Okay, so let's start with the traditional Bukhar account. And a Bukhar is like a historical chronicle, right? Maybe more narrative-driven sometimes?
Yeah, often less rigidly factual than official records, perhaps. And this one, it leans heavily on treachery.
Okay, lay it out for us.
So the story goes, Shivaji sends his officers Raghunath Balal Korde and Sambhaji Kavji to Javli, the official reason, to talk about a marriage alliance Shivaji and Moore's daughter.
A classic diplomatic cover.
Supposedly, yes, to make Moore let his guard down, and apparently Chandralal liked to drink, maybe making him less suspicious.
Plausible, I guess. So the officers are there, supposedly talking marriage, but really
Scouting defenses, looking for weaknesses, maybe signs of dissent inside Moore's camp. And then Raghunath Ballal supposedly comes up with the assassination plan.
just like that.
According to this Bakhar, yes. It describes a secret meeting. Chandrarao and his brother Suryarao are killed. The officers escape.
Wow, okay.
Then what? Then Shivaji arrives with his forces, lays siege to Hashamgad, fights Moore's sons, Bajirao and Krishnarao, and the minister Hanantrao.
Who gets killed in the fighting.
Right. Moore's sons are eventually captured, taken to Purandar Fort.
And it doesn't end there, does it, in this version?
No. There's this detail about intercepting treasonous letters from the sons to Bijapur, which leads to their execution. The women are released afterwards.
It's a very dramatic, very cloak and dagger story.
Extremely. But as our sources point out, there are issues, like the idea of two separate marriage proposal plots used for assassination attempts against both Chandrarao and Hanmantrao, it seems. Well, a bit much, a bit unlikely.
Strains belief, yeah.
Yeah.
Which leads us to the other main account.
The Jedhe chronology. And it paints a very different picture of how Javli fell.
How different?
It talks about prolonged fighting. Over 5 months, from December 1655 to around April or May 1656, not a quick assassination job.
So more of a conventional military campaign.
Exactly. The Jedhe chronology makes zero mention of treachery. It says, Shivaji took Javli by fighting, with help from the Jedhe Bishmukh, the Bandal and Salibkar followers, other Mavli chiefs.
Okay, that sounds more like a straightforward conquest, albeit a long one.
It does. And this account also mentions Shivaji sending an ultimatum first, probably via Raghunath Ballal Korde, before starting a siege of Javli itself, which lasted about a month.
And Moore didn't just give up.
No. Interestingly, it says Chandrarao escaped Javli, went to the fort of Rari, actually took it back from Shivaji's men who were holding it, and fought on from there for another 3 months before finally surrendering.
That's a very different narrative. Resistance, escape, continued fighting.
Completely different. And what gives this version weight is that it's backed up by other sources, like the Itihas Sangraha and Parasnis's work on Mahabaleshwar. They support the idea of a long military campaign.
Okay, so multiple sources point away from the simple treachery story. What about the aftermath? Do the accounts agree there?
Not entirely. The Itihas Sangraha suggests something interesting. Chandralal was initially pardoned, maybe even reinstated as a fief holder under Shivaji.
Really, after all that?
Apparently. But then later he was executed at Chakan, supposedly for plotting with the Gorpades of Mudhol.
What does the Jedhe chronology say about the end?
It describes a reconciliation, actually. Mediated by Haibatral Silipkar, Moore's lands were divided up between Chandrarao and his brothers. Suggests more of a negotiated end, at least initially.
So confusing. How do we make sense of these? Assassination, long campaign, pardon, execution, reconciliation.
Well, one plausible way to reconcile them, as our source suggests, is this. Maybe Chandrarao did surrender or submit after the main campaign,
Okay.
but perhaps Hanmantrao, his minister, kept fighting. Maybe he continued the resistance.
Ah, I see. And then Sambhaji Kavji was sent, maybe with that marriage pretext again.
Possibly. And maybe Hanmantrao was killed then, perhaps through some kind of stratagem that could be described as treacherous.
And later writers just got the details mixed up, applied the treachery part to Chandrarao himself.
It's a very possible explanation. It allows elements of both stories to be true, in a way. Later chroniclers might have simplified or conflated events.
Okay, that makes some sense.
Yeah.
So regardless of the exact messy details,
Regardless, the end result was clear. Shivaji took Javli. He got the forts, he got the strategic control, and sources agree he captured significant treasure that the Maurya's had built up. That bolstered his own resources considerably.
right, Javli was secured. Now, Shivaji didn't just stop there. He had other consolidation work to do, right? Like this Babaji Kandadev in the Shivdar Valley.
Yes, after the Mauryas fell, this Kandav apparently saw an opportunity, declared himself independent, started plundering.
Challenging Shivaji's new authority.
Directly. And Shivaji's response is interesting. Kandadev was arrested, but instead of execution, which you might expect for rebellion, he was blinded. The reason given, his priestly status. It shows that pragmatic side of Shivaji again, but also sometimes a kind of calculated leniency based on social factors.
Fascinating. Okay, then there was Bandal, the Deshmukh of Hirdas, over in the Meval region.
Another pocket of resistance, He held Rohita fort and initially refused Shivaji's peaceful offers.
So another fight.
Yes. Chitnis's account describes a night attack on Rohita. It was successful, but Bandal himself fought fiercely, died resisting.
But what happened to his followers, particularly someone named Bijapur Deshpande?
Yes. This is significant. Despite Bandal's defeat, Shivaji recognized the bravery shown, especially by Bijapur.
He didn't just punish them.
No, quite the opposite with Deshpande. He treated him generously, confirmed his existing rights, and crucially, saw his potential and brought him into his own service.
And Bijapur becomes quite important later on, doesn't he?
Immensely heroic role later, yes. It really highlights Shivaji's knack for spotting talent, even in former enemies, and winning their loyalty. That ability to integrate people was key.
And the overall impact of dealing with figures like Kondadev and Bandal?
It brought stability to the Mavel region. Less internal conflict, more security for the ordinary people, the peasants. He also introduced a fairer land revenue system.
And recruitment.
Yes, he had this open policy. Even many of the Maurya's former soldiers joined Shivaji's army. He wasn't just conquering, he was integrating, building a broader base.
Smart. Now, to really cement his hold on Javli and that whole area, he needed a central strong point, right?
Exactly. A new fort, right near the source of the Krishna River. Strategic location.
And he put more Trimal Pingal in charge of building it.
He did. Pingal was a trusted figure, experienced, had served under Shivaji's father, Shahaji. Good with finances, good with military matters.
And he got the job done.
He did. Built the fortress, named Pratapgad, to Shivaji's demanding specifications. It became a really important anchor for Shivaji's power in the region.
And Shivaji wasn't just about forts, though. There was a religious dimension, too.
Yes. Alongside Pratapgad, he invested in religious sites. He had the old temple at Mahabaleshwar renovated, repaired.
And built a new one.
A new temple for the goddess Pavani, his family deity, modeled on the famous one at Tuljapur. Adorned it richly, visited it often himself. It shows the linking of political power with religious devotion and legitimacy.
Okay, so while all this local consolidation is happening, what's going on in the bigger picture with the Mughals in Bijapur?
Well, around this time, you have Aurangzeb marching south, then making a treaty with Bijapur. It was a complex situation.
And Shivaji's role in that?
He played it very skillfully, managed to protect his own interests, even sort of deceived Aurangzeb tactically to gain some concessions within Bijapur territory while Aurangzeb was busy.
Always maneuvering. And once Aurangzeb turned back north,
Shivaji wasted no time. He pushed hard into the Konkan, down towards the coast, swiftly captured a string of key towns, Ratnagiri, Vijayadurg, Suvarnadurg, Salsi, Karpatan.
Extending his reach significantly towards the sea.
A major expansion. Controlling the Konkan wasn't just about land, it was about sea access, trade routes, denying those to enemies. Hugely important strategically.
But rapid expansion brings its own issues, right? Like integrating new forces. I read about some Pathan soldiers.
Yes, exactly. About 700 Pathans, former Bijapuri soldiers probably, turned up looking for work with Shivaji. This caused a debate among his advisors.
Trust issues.
Big time. Were they reliable? Could they be integrated? It was a real question.
Who argued for taking them on?
Kamaji Naik Pansimbal, an experienced Havildar, a fort commander, he gave some really powerful advice.
What did you say?
He argued for impartiality, that a true kingdom's strength comes from using talent wherever you find it, regardless of religion. He had this great line about a true ruler seeing all subjects equally.
And Shivaji listened.
He did. Pansimbal's argument won him over. The Pathans were enrolled, put under Raghubalal Tray's command.
And this was significant.
It marked the start of, larger scale recruitment of Muslims into Shivaji's forces. Some reached very high ranks later. Shows his practical, state-building mindset over religious exclusion.
But even with the Konkan gains and integrating new troops, there was still a major thorn in his side down there.
Oh, yes. The Abyssinians, the Siddis, based at Janjira Fort.
A naval power.
A strong naval power, right on the coast. And they constantly raided Shivaji's new Konkan territories. A persistent threat he knew he had to deal with to make his conquests secure.
So he launched a campaign against them.
He did. The first one was led by his Peshwa at the time, Shamraj Pat, against the city chief, Fateh Khan.
How did that go?
Badly. Fateh Khan proved very capable militarily. The Maratha forces suffered significant losses, and Shamrajpant had to retreat. It was Shivaji's first major military failure, really.
A setback. How did Shivaji react?
Decisively. He didn't tolerate failure at that level. Shamrajpant was dismissed as Peshwa.
Replace.
Yes. Raghunath Pant was put in charge of the next Janjira campaign, and Moro Trimal Pingal, the guy who built Pratapgad.
Yes.
He was made the new Peshwa, a big promotion, showing Shivaji valued competence and results. Other key jobs were filled too. Nilo Sondev as Muzumdar, finance head, Gango Mangaji as Wakanis, handling correspondence, Yasaji Kunk as Sari Nobat, infantry commander, reshuffling the top team.
Okay. And all this rising power, the fall of the Moors, did it worry other neighbors, like the Sawants of Wadi?
It certainly got their attention. The Sawant chief saw the writing on the wall, at least for a while. He approached Shivaji and made a treaty.
What kind of treaty?
Ceded half his revenues, acknowledged Shivaji's overall authority, but kept internal control. Basically accepting Shivaji as the dominant power.
But was it genuine?
The sources suggest maybe not entirely. It seems the Sawant chief's loyalty shifted again later, hinting at more trouble to come from that direction.
Always complex. So the fight against Janjira was ongoing.
It continued, yes, but the monsoon rains interrupted campaigning for a time. Which brings us close to the next major crisis looming for Shivaji.
The Afzal Khan invasion.
Exactly, that was coming next.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive, what are the big picture points? We've seen Shivaji's, incredible strategic mind at work, consolidating power.
Definitely. His complex dealings with rivals like the Moras, sometimes diplomacy, sometimes force, his adaptability and how he ran things, how he built his army.
And bouncing back from setbacks, like that first Janjira campaign.
Right, and it's so important to remember those conflicting stories, like about Javli. It reminds us history isn't always a single, simple narrative.
We have to weigh the evidence, consider the perspectives. It makes it richer.
It really does. Appreciating the nuances is key.
Absolutely. Which kind of leaves us with a final thought for everyone listening. Shivaji managed to bring together such diverse people, navigate this incredibly tricky political world, deal with obstacles. How did all those skills honed during this period, set him up for his long-term success, for building that independent kingdom?
Understanding this phase, the consolidation, the challenges, the strategies, it really gives you the context for everything that follows, doesn't it? For appreciating just how remarkable his later achievements were.
I hope you like this chapter. We need volunteers and sponsors to create content with even better quality and with more variety. If you wish to join this initiative as a volunteer or sponsor, please click the links given in description below. To help us reach more viewers, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Biography Central. Thank you for your time. It means a lot. Namaste.